The air inside the Norfolk conference room was cool and carried the faint scent of old paper and industrial cleaner. Rows of new intelligence analysts, crisp in their service uniforms, sat in attentive silence. Rear Admiral John Harwood Crowe stood at the podium, a figure carved from decades of salt wind and hard decisions. His presence wasn't loud, it was dense, a gravitational pull born of command. He was concluding his welcome speech, his eyes, the color of a winter sea, sweeping over the fresh faces. "You are the new eyes and ears of the fleet," he said, his voice gravelly. "The intelligence you distill will guide ships, inform admirals, and protect sailors. Never underestimate the weight of that." As he finished, he decided on a personal touch. "I'll come down and meet each of you. Let's put names to the faces who will be handling our nation's secrets." He moved from the podium with a deliberate pace, shaking hands, offering a firm nod, exchanging a few words with each young officer. He asked about their hometowns, their colleges, the usual icebreakers. The line was almost done when he reached the last analyst. She stood perfectly straight, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that accentuated the sharp lines of her face. Her eyes, a striking shade of hazel, met his with a calm, direct focus that felt different from the nervous or eager glances of her peers. It was the look of someone who was assessed situations, not just participating in them. "And you, Lieutenant?" Admiral Crowe asked, extending his hand. "What's your name?" "Lieutenant Samantha Vance, sir," she said, her grip firm and steady. Reporting for duty." As she released his hand, the cuff of her uniform shirt shifted slightly with the motion. There, on the inside of her right wrist, just peeking from beneath the starched fabric, was the very top edge of a tattoo. It was a small, exquisitely detailed trident, its points sharp and clean. But it wasn't the trident itself that made the air vanish from Admiral Crowe's lungs. It was the single, deliberate bolt of lightning that speared vertically through its center. His own hand, still hanging in the space between them, went rigid. The casual, welcoming smile froze on his face, then dissolved into a mask of stark, unguarded shock. The low murmur of the room faded into a dull roar in his ears. His eyes, wide and suddenly haunted, snapped from the tattoo back to her face, to searching her features with an intensity that was almost violent. The young woman before him seemed to blur, and for a terrifying second he was not in a Norfolk conference room, but in the harsh, sun-bleached sands of a distant Helmand province, the weight of a lost brother heavy on his soul. The room held its breath. A senior chief in the front row frowned, sensing the Admiral's sudden shift. Lieutenant Vance herself remained still, but a flicker of understanding and profound sorrow passed through her eyes, as if she had been waiting for this moment, dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure for her entire career. She did not pull her sleeve down. She simply held his gaze, allowing the silent, seismic recognition to wash over them both. A ghost stepping out of the past and into the stark, fluorescent light of the present. For several heartbeats that stretched into an eternity, Admiral Crowe was utterly lost. The polished floor beneath his shoes became grainy, hot sand. The hum of the air conditioner transformed into the persistent drone of a Black Hawk overhead. The face of the young lieutenant merged with the grinning, sun-weathered visage of his younger brother, Chief Petty Officer Mark "Shark" Crowe, a Navy SEAL who had vanished on a mission 15 years ago. The tattoo on her wrist was not just similar, it was identical. The shark's tooth, Mark had called it, a custom design he'd inked on his entire team after their first successful deployment. A trident for the Navy, lightning for their speed and lethality, worn on the firing hand wrist as a silent creed. Mark had one. Only his 5 brothers in arms had the others. And yet, here it was, on the wrist of a woman who couldn't have been more than a teenager when Mark disappeared. The Admiral's training finally overrode the shock. He blinked, a hard, deliberate action, forcing the present back into focus. He lowered his hand slowly as if the limb were made of lead. "Lieutenant Vance," he said, his voice strangely hollow, stripped of its earlier authority. "My office. Now, please." He turned without waiting for a reply, his stride stiff, leaving a wave of bewildered whispers in his wake. Samantha Vance followed, her posture still impeccable, but her mind racing. She had known this day would come. She had prepared for it through intelligence school, through her commissioning, through every step that brought her here. But no preparation could armor her against the raw, naked pain she had just seen in the Admiral's eyes. The walk to his office was silent. He held the door for her, a gesture of automatic courtesy that felt surreal under the circumstances. The office was what she expected. Maritime charts, models of ships, framed photos of aircraft carriers cutting through blue seas. But her eyes were drawn to one picture on the credenza behind his desk. A younger, laughing John Crow had his arm around a man who was unmistakably his brother, both of them in camo, mountains rising in the background. Mark Crow's smile was brilliant, full of a wild, joyful life. Admiral Crow did not sit behind his desk. He went to the window, his back to her, staring out at the busy naval base. "Where did you get that tattoo, Lieutenant?" The question was quiet, deadly serious. "From my father, sir," she said, her voice clear but soft. The Admiral turned, his expression unreadable. "Your father?" "Yes, sir. His name was David Vance. He was a Marine Corps scout sniper. He got the tattoo in 2009 from a Navy SEAL he served alongside in a joint task force in Afghanistan. That SEAL saved his life during an ambush in a place called the Tangi Valley. My father said the SEAL insisted they get matching ink afterward. A brotherhood thing." She paused, seeing the Admiral's jaw tighten. "He told me the SEAL's name was Mark Crow." The name hung in the room like smoke after a gunshot. Admiral Crow closed his eyes, leaning heavily against the windowsill. The confirmation was a physical blow. "Your father," he repeated, opening his eyes. "Where is he now?" "He passed away, sir. 4 years ago. Cancer. He was a firefighter after his medical discharge." "The cancer was service-related?" She swallowed, maintaining her composure. "Before he died, he told me everything. About the mission. About the man who saved him. He told me Mark Crow was the bravest, best man he'd ever known, and that he never came home from his next rotation." Admiral Crow walked to his desk and sank into his chair, the weight of 15 years of unanswered questions pressing down on him. "The official report said the team was lost. No bodies recovered. A total vacuum." He looked at her, his gaze sharp. "What did your father tell you about that day in the Tangi? Tell me exactly." The room seemed to grow smaller, the models of ships and jets silent witnesses to a history about to be unearthed. Samantha took a steadying breath, not to recall the facts. They were etched into her soul, but to find the strength to voice them to this grieving brother. "He said it was a scorching day," she began, her voice taking on a distant quality. "Their joint team was ambushed in a narrow pass. My father was providing overwatch from a ridge. His spotter was hit. He was pinned down, taking heavy fire. He said he'd made peace with it. Then, from nowhere, Mark and 2 of his SEALs were there. They'd moved up under the cover of the gunfight itself. Mark dragged him to cover, then stayed and laid down suppressing fire so my father could fall back to a better position." She could see it in her mind, the story painted in her father's vivid, painful detail. "He said Mark was shot in the leg during that action, a through and through. My father tried to patch it, but Mark just laughed, tied a tourniquet, and kept fighting. After they broke contact and got to the exfil point, they were waiting for the helo. That's when Mark produced a small bottle of ink and a needle. Said if they were going to bleed together, they should wear the same mark. He did my father's tattoo first, right there in the dust. Then my father, who had some tattoo experience from his youth, did Mark's. They were brothers from that moment, my father said. Admiral Crowe was staring at the photo on his credenza, his brother's smiling face. That sounds like him, he whispered, a painful fondness in his voice. The damn fool was always tattooing something on someone. He looked back at Samantha. But that doesn't explain how you ended up here. In my command, with that on your wrist. Samantha met his gaze. It's why I'm here, sir. Oh, it's why I joined Navy intelligence. My father spent years looking for answers, for any clue about what happened to Mark's team after they rotated back. He had contacts, he filed requests, but he hit dead ends. The official silence was absolute. He made me promise. No, I promised him that I would find out, that I would get into the system and learn the truth. For him, and for you, sir, though I didn't know if I'd ever meet you. She straightened her shoulders. I requested this duty station because I knew you were here. I didn't know how to approach you. I just knew I had to get close to the information. Admiral Crowe studied her for a long moment. The intelligence officer in him assessing her story, her demeanor, her obvious conviction. The brother in him saw the living, breathing link to the last days of his brother's life. And the shock was receding, replaced by a tumultuous wave of grief, curiosity, and a fragile, dangerous thing. Hope. What was your father's full name and unit? He asked, his tone now that of an investigator. She provided it without hesitation. He typed it into his computer, his fingers stabbing the keys. Minutes passed in silence. Then he leaned back, his face ashen. David Vance, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. His service record corroborates the Joint Task Force assignment, the medical discharge for the injuries sustained. It's all here. He looked at her, the last of his professional doubt gone. My God, it's all true. The silence that followed was different. No longer charged with suspicion, but thick with shared history and unspoken sorrow. Admiral Crowe finally gestured to the chair in front of his desk. Sit down. Ye Lieutenant! It was an order, but it was also an invitation. She sat. He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, steepling his fingers. For 15 years, I've had nothing but a flag in a case and a headstone with no body. The Navy calls it a presumptive finding of death. It's a sterile, empty phrase. It doesn't tell you how. It doesn't tell you why. It doesn't tell you if he suffered. His voice was raw. My parents died without ever knowing. It ate my father alive. Samantha nodded, her own eyes glistening. My father was the same. He carried the guilt. He believed if Mark hadn't been injured saving him, if he'd been at full strength for his next mission, maybe things would have been different. It was his lifelong regret. That's survivor's guilt. And it's a liar, Crowe said sharply, then softened. Mark wouldn't have seen it that way. Saving your father was the mission. It was who he was. He paused, a new thought dawning. You said your father looked for answers. Did he ever find anything? Any fragment? Any rumor the official reports don't show? Samantha hesitated. This was the threshold. Not a fact, sir, but a theory. He had a friend, a retired master sergeant who did private security work in the region years later. He heard whispers, not about the mission itself, but about the aftermath. Admiral Crowe's gaze was laser-focused. What whispers? That the team's disappearance wasn't a tactical failure, that it was intentional, that they were targeted because of something they saw or recovered on a previous op, that they weren't just killed, they were vanished to cover something up. She let the words hang, heavy and dark. My father believed the silence around their case wasn't just the fog of war. It was a curtain. The Admiral's face went stony. This aligned with his own deepest, darkest suspicions, the ones he could never voice, the ones that had kept him awake for 15 years. The official narrative had always felt too clean, too empty for the loss of an entire SEAL team. Do you have any names? Any locations? Any proof? No proof, sir. Only the name of the retired master sergeant. And a region my father's friend mentioned, the mountain valleys near the border in Kunar province, an area that was unusually quiet for years after the incident, as if it were being guarded. Crow stood up again, pacing behind his desk. The professional in him was now fully engaged, the brother momentarily shoved aside by the tactician. This is explosive, Lieutenant. What you're suggesting, it implies a cover-up at a high level. It means my brother's death, the death of his entire team, might be tied to something corrupt, something buried. He stopped and looked at her. You understand the danger of pursuing this? Not just career danger, real danger. I do, sir. And yet you're here. I gave my word to my father and to myself. Admiral Crow made a decision. The young woman before him was no longer just another new analyst. She was a legacy of his brother's courage, a living reminder of his sacrifice, and now perhaps the key to unlocking the truth. He walked to a small safe embedded in the wall behind his desk. He worked the combination, opened it, and pulled out a thick, non-descriptive file folder. It was labeled only with a case number. He placed it on the desk between them. This, he said, his voice low, is everything I've privately compiled over the years. Every document I could legally access, every after-action report from surrounding units, every satellite image of the suspected area for 6 months after they went missing, unofficial interviews with pilots, with intel officers who've since retired. It's a ghost hunt, and it's led nowhere definitive. He pushed the file toward her. Until now, you have a perspective I don't. You have your father's first-hand account, his personal network, his theory, and you have something else. You are an unknown. No one is watching you. Not for this. Samantha looked at the file, then at him, understanding dawning. You want me to look into it? Officially? Unofficially. Off the books. You will do your regular duties and you will excel at them. But in your spare time, you will use your training, your new access, and your unique motivation to re-examine this. You will report only to me. We will use my authority to request specific archive materials, but we must be careful. If there is a curtain, as your father said, we cannot shake it. He fixed her with a look that was part order, part plea. Find them, Lieutenant Vance. Find my brother. Bring him home. The weight of the file felt immense, as if it contained not just paper, but the actual ghosts of 5 lost men. Samantha placed a hand on it, a solemn gesture. I will, sir. Admiral Crow looked out the window again, at the bustling present-day Navy. He would have liked you, you know. Mark. He had a soft spot for stubborn, fearless people. He turned back, a ghost of his brother's smile touching his own lips for the first time. Dismissed. Aye, Lieutenant, and welcome aboard. Samantha stood, collected the file, and snapped a perfect salute, which he returned. As she turned to leave, he spoke once more, his voice quieter. And Samantha? She paused at the door. Thank your father for me, for remembering him, for raising a daughter who keeps her promises. She nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat, and stepped out into the hallway, closing the door on the Admiral and his silent vigil. The fluorescent lights of the corridor seemed too bright, too normal. She carried the file against her chest, its edges pressing into her uniform. She wasn't just an analyst anymore. She was a keeper of a flame, a hunter of shadows, a daughter fulfilling an oath. The journey into the heart of a 15-year-old mystery had just begun. And its first clue had been inked on her skin long before she ever understood its power.